I am one of the country's biggest and loudest Remainers, and yet I know what it's like to be someone who is blamed by Remainers for voting Brexit, and it's really not very nice. The most common comment that we get on our channels is, you farmers, you all voted for Brexit, you reap what you sow, you deserve it. Look, farmers are not all one monolithic voting bloc. They didn't all vote for Brexit. What happened was the Leave campaign decided to use food, farming and fishing centre stage in their campaign, and the Remain campaign didn't go anywhere near food and farming. And the truth of the matter is that the vote was split in farming because the vote in the country was split, because they're just people. And even if some farmers did vote for Brexit, I can tell you now that none of them, or hardly any of them, voted for what we've ended up with Brexit, which is an absolute mess, particularly bad for food and farming. But those of you, especially those of you who voted Remain, or perhaps those of you who live in the European Union and are angry about Brexit, being angry with people who voted Brexit is not helpful. It actually continues polarisation, and it's also not correct, because the vote in 2016 decided nothing. It was just a poll. And again, the Leave campaign, the Conservatives and Jeremy Corbyn were absolutely brilliant at validating it and making out that it was a democratic event when it wasn't. The vote which actually ensured Brexit was the 2019 general election, when 43% gave Boris Johnson a majority to get Brexit through Parliament, that's through the Commons and through the Lords, and ensure that we left the European Union. And that's exactly what happened. 43% gave Boris Johnson an 80-seat majority to deliver Brexit. And in 1983, Michael Foot did the same thing as Boris Johnson. He put in his manifesto that he wanted to leave the European Union.
Labour proposes massive public investment in industry, housing and social services, a more realistic exchange rate for the pound and a national agreement with the unions to cover pay, prices, profits and much else. On Europe, the document promises withdrawal in an amicable and orderly way. The law would be changed, there'd be negotiations with our partners, but after a period of transition, Britain would be out within the lifetime of a parliament. Labour would cancel Trident and Cruise, remove other US nuclear bases and include Britain's Polaris in the Geneva negotiations. But all this would have to be compatible with staying in NATO.
We cannot afford to continue with the present policies. We cannot afford to continue with policies of mass unemployment. That means pouring down the drain 15, 16, 17 billion pounds a year. It means pouring down the drain our precious North Sea oil and wasting it. We can't afford mass unemployment, and this our policy is the one that explains why and how we can travel in the opposite direction.
But he didn't win a majority. And most people that voted in 1983 remember that Michael Foot's manifesto was called the longest suicide note in history, but most people don't realise that Michael Foot wanted to do a Brexit, and he didn't need to have a referendum before he did that. Yes, we had a referendum in 1975. That was 3 years after we joined the European Union, and that was merely to see if people were happy with how being in the European Union had gone, or the EEC as it was called in those days. And that was because people in Labour were unhappy about being in the European Union. And it's that simple. So don't blame people. People vote in elections, or they're persuaded to vote. The people that actually make things happen are the people that we vote for, MPs, and also those that, basically oversee in the upper chambers the law that goes through. It is not the man on the street's fault. It is the Conservative Party who birthed Brexit. David Cameron actually birthed Brexit, but even before him, it was Nigel Farage. And before Nigel Farage, there were other people pushing for Brexit, from Zach and Ben Goldsmith's father, James Goldsmith, who actually founded the referendum party For years people have been working to try and do a Brexit. And now that we have a Brexit, what we need is to do the reverse to what they did. We need to make sure that we build a campaign which ensures we actually rejoin the European Union eventually. We certainly need to get back in the single market and customs union very, very quickly, because things are going to continue to get worse, particularly for our food and farming. But ultimately, we really need to be united. And if you go around saying to people, nah, you voted Brexit, so I blame you, we are not going to be able to achieve the goals that we need to achieve. We have to be positive, and we have to unite behind shared ambitions and not go around blaming people for what they may or may not have voted. I am one of the country's biggest and loudest Remainers, and yet I know what it's like to be someone who is blamed by Remainers for voting Brexit. And it's really not very nice. It makes you feel as if someone's prodding you and poking you and having a go at you. And really what we need to say is, and what we need to agree on, is that Brexit is not working out. And that's already happening. We're seeing that because poll after poll after poll is showing that really only about 9% of people are happy with Brexit. In truth, I think most people just don't want to admit that they were wrong. They kind of, some of them will say, oh, it's not the Brexit I voted for, or all of this nonsense. But what we need to do as a campaign is actually sort of say, this is really going to make Britain good again and bring back our economy and make things better and give us less queues at the airport and at the port to go to France. All of these things. You're not going to have to worry about all of the red tape involved with trying to export and import. All of the benefits of getting rid of Brexit are exciting. And the last thing we need to do, or be talking about, is blaming people for voting Brexit. So please, let's agree to stop blaming people for voting Brexit. Please stop blaming farmers for Brexit. Please.